So embrace change. Change is going to happen the whole time. It's happening faster. Never get arrogant when things are going super well, because you don't know when the next crisis is around the corner.
Welcome to the latest episode in Leadership Blueprint. As we know, this series has all been about speaking to different people across the world to try and understand more about their leadership journey and the life lessons that they've learned, and passing some of that knowledge onto yourselves. So if you've not seen some of those episodes, please go back, like and subscribe to the channel, and do check those out. But we're really excited today to be joined by Tony Couloubis. So with over 25 years experience across multiple global locations within the private equity and principal alternative investment space, including organizations like AIG Investment, where he was the managing director for the Africa Investment Fund, Tony's also worked as co-founder of a number of companies on a number of global M&A transactions. So I think his experience and journey today is going to be a really great one to delve further into, to understand some of those lessons that he's learned, some of the different cultures he's been interacting with, and how he's gone around building some of those transactions. So Tony, thanks so much for joining us today. I mean, this is going to be a really interesting conversation for the audience. So I'm just going to hand over to you in a second and just ask you to give people a little bit more of an introduction with a bit more detail, and then we can then start to delve into some of those lessons and things that you've learned from there. So again, thanks so much for joining us today, and over to you, as they say.
Fantastic. Oliver, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak on your podcast. Yeah, so basically I'm a chartered accountant by training. Started off my career in audits and doing due diligences. I find myself also working at Deloitte in Europe, and one of the first M&A transactions was I was both on the audit side and on the corporate finance side, and I led the due diligence for Saudi Aramco's acquisition of an oil refinery at that time in Greece. They acquired 50% of the oil refinery. It was the largest transaction ever in the Balkans. It was something like $500 million at the time. And so basically that also started shaping my way forward and being excited working with such a large M&A. And subsequently I ended up being with Citibank, both in the private equity side, City Ventures, specifically in the southern part of Africa. And at the same time, I also formed and headed up the analyst group for the corporate investment bank in Southern Africa. I had a portfolio of about $700 million at the time. Very successful, zero losses during my time period over there. And then I continued my journey with private equity up in Europe, specifically once again back in the southeastern part of Europe, with the largest private equity group there in global finance. And I found myself then gravitating back into Africa, where I joined AIG Investments. At the time, the African Infrastructure Fund was the first private sector Pan-African private equity fund, the largest at the time, $400 million infrastructure. Had a lot of fun on that, and I was with AIG Investments in Pinebridge for over 11, 12 years, and then started off the platform called SPE Capital, which is predominantly at the moment a North African private equity, but also a bit more in the EMEA. And we formed and we raised capital, and it was and is the first private sector industrial fund for Africa. It's almost fully invested. Very exciting. I sit on as a voting IC investment committee member. And at the same time, I've also done a number of projects on the GP-led continuation funds, helped form Fairview Capital Group, and basically it was a boutique advisor, and got involved and led a number of transactions up in Europe, 4 transactions in Europe, in South America, and at the same time also Asia and India. At the moment, I'm also sitting on the board and investment committee for Harith, which is a Pan-African infrastructure, the largest infrastructure group for Africa, and we're busy turning that into investment holding group. Yeah, so it's been a very interesting yeah, been a very interesting career for me. I've done things that I never expected, and at the same time, I've had the opportunity to interact with so many different ethnic groups, partner with them, and it's been very colourful. And I think part of the journey has also been the social gains that I've seen. Yeah, sitting back, yes, making money for our investors, which is always important, but seeing the social gains has been an incredible journey, and I've enjoyed that tremendously.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of some of that diversity. And I think, over the time we've known each other, I think that's always been something that I've found really interesting in our conversations, is that diversity of location, that diversity of, investments that you've done, and ultimately, therefore, the different styles that you've interacted with and that you've delivered. And I suppose for us and the listeners, what would be interesting to see is, were there particular key milestones in the career that kind of shaped your approach to leadership and investment? Is there particular ones that stand out that you could pass on as sort of life lessons, as it were?
Yeah, sure. I think this industry teaches you a lot of life lessons, especially as the cycles change tremendously. I must admit, for me, leading the audit teams, really early up, leading the audit teams and the due diligence teams, you're dealing with highly intelligent professionals. And earlier on, I realized that I have to provide these skilled people the space, let them be entrepreneurial in their approach, and they then come forward and they give you their best performances. So for me, that's a lesson that I learned really upfront. Clearly, along the way, also dealing with with many different nationalities, different attitudes, listening closely. So being more quiet and just listening to people and giving them what they want if you can. I think that's also been very, very, very important. Also, I kind of interacting, working for Citigroup, dealing with, I did realize, I'm working for the likes of AIG Investments, the likes of the Citigroups. So you've got these huge global organizations originated out of New York. So I realized in the emerging markets, what am I? I have to perform and I have to deliver something that someone sitting in New York understands and expects, but I have to marry to the local realities. So really, I'm the in-between person that can make sense on the ground, and at the same time produce something that the professionals in New York will understand. So that has been a lesson that I learned also pretty young, and I've always applied it, and understanding another lesson, being in the AIG and in the emerging markets team, the global emerging markets infrastructure team, many different nationalities in the team, very different. The team was across the globe, and what the lessons are. Everyone says things in a different way, so you are patient. You listen to what they're saying, and at the end of the day, it was one of the most best experiences and successful experiences, because everyone came with a different angle to and the advice. So you end up seeing the 360 degree. So it's acceptance of someone's background, someone's training, and acceptance of the different experiences they've had, and and the way they talk. Everyone talks in a different way. So be appreciative that you've got such color in your team. And once again, it's been a very color lessons.
Yeah. No, and I think that's always something we've seen a lot on this journey that we're going on with this podcast. Is I think the people that have been able to understand, listen, as you said, and then embrace those different cultures, really do get the maximum output in terms of just different ideas coming into the forefront. So obviously you've led a number of successful turnarounds. Have you seen within those particular challenging situations, how did you manage them in a turnaround situation? Is it very different? Do you have more resistance? Is there a different way you need to approach it? I think it'd just be great to understand some of those turnaround stories in a bit more detail and some of the successes.
Oliver, yeah. First of all, I think during a turnaround, I tend to feel very alive, because life becomes very, very real. So just the nature with the turnarounds, you've got very little time. Most of the times, you've got very little time. So it needs decisive action. You can't sit there debating for hours on end and doing elaborate things. So you're going to need decisive and correct immediate action. So some of the lessons, or put it this way, with the turnarounds, I think it's important that you actually leave your office, that you actually sit in the organization, and that's where a role as a dotted line CFO, dotted line COO, because it puts you right in the heart of the operations and in touch with everything. And then you have to draw up your plan, immediately understand what's going on in the organization, what is causing the actual issues in the organization, and then draw up your action plan. But by no means this is not going to be your Mackenzie's masterpiece. You don't have time for that. But you've got to see where the low-hanging fruit is, and you've got to try and address those as soon as possible. I must admit, in the organizations where I've been always accepted. There's been an appreciation that there's someone with skills coming with a different view, that's actually, especially if you invested in that you're actually not alienating and just running away and letting someone else to sort out the trouble. So in my experience, I've definitely felt that people embrace me. The ones that are not that embracing are red flags. So during the process, you always kind of try and figure out why they haven't been embraced or what's going on there. But that's a smaller kind of issue that you eventually can solve. Certainly for me in the turnaround, the key thing is that is the product and the service that the company is providing. Does the market want it? And for me, that will immediately show you what way you need to go. You're lucky if the market wants the product or the service, then you've got to figure out immediately what is it that's actually hampering. Is it certain defects in the product? Has something gone wrong with the service delivery? And sometimes it's in that journey, once you get stuck in and you start looking at the operations, you also start picking up that there's a lot of waste in the organization. So that's an opportunity to start cleaning that out. In a number of turnarounds, I have been known to jump onto being down in dispatch and jumping onto trucks Yeah, what I'm saying, lorries and going off to offices and kind of demanding, why aren't you paying? Yeah, why aren't you paying us? What's wrong?
Mm.
You've got $1 million payment outstanding because one wheel on the chair hadn't been properly fixed, and they've been complaining about it for 6 months. So kind of
Yeah.
saying, okay, fixing, I've got my man, you're fixing the wheel, give me my $1 million check, or else I'm taking all your furniture, and there's a lot of customers there. So I'm known to do that, that kind of thing. A lot of fun along the way, yeah. So on
I think you need that.
yeah.
You need that personality as well. Don't you? I think that comes across very much in your personality as well. I think it is that balance between enjoying being hands-on, but also having that strategy piece. And I think that. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I think the bit that's interesting is you've mentioned there. Sometimes there's quick wins, sometimes there's red flags from individuals that maybe they're not on board, maybe they've not been listened to, and again, they're things you need to look at. But what would you say are some of then the critical factors in leading a turnaround? Because you've mentioned certain things there, and you've mentioned some hands-on stuff, you mentioned some potential red flags, you've mentioned some low-hanging fruit. How would you kind of classify the critical, we must go with A, B, C, and maybe have one or two examples of those if relevant as well, and things? I think they'd be great to hear.
Yeah, just some kind of key things, and then I can walk you through any example.
Yeah, sure.
I think the first thing on key things for me, once again, is the sales of the organization, the product. If the market wants a product, then your life is a lot easier. The second thing is the delivery of that product, the service that backs it up. Where the problems in it, and clearly you have to, in that whole process, is clearly the fact that you are in the turnaround. There are people hitting on your door wanting their checks. You've got creditors, you've got banks hitting, so you have to engage with them at the same time. That's very critical, obviously, within the law. But my experience is that when they understand the situation, they know that you're actually climbing in. It's not your full-time job, but resources are being thrown at it, and they can see that actually action is taking place. People start, as long as they are kept abreast, then they realize, look, give these guys a chance to turn it around. We will get our money back, and then business will go ahead. If we are impatient, then we won't get our money back. There's a lot of fanfare, a lot of shouting and all that, but at the end of the day, that they will appreciate that you're climbing in to turn things around. So clearly the creditors and banks, right through the process. Essentially, you're also running a lot of processes at the same time. You don't have time to do things piecemeal. You're diving in, you're sorting out operations, but at the same time, another critical factor for me has always been what is core in the organization. Many times organizations start doing things that are no longer core. So you've got to identify, are there some divisions, are there some assets that are not really core? And
yes,
that's a key thing for you to do an M&A on it. If it's divisions, and that frees up a lot of cash, makes the organization lighter, the load lighter to take it forward. At the same time, while you're in doing all this, I think it's also important to be thinking about a white knight that's going to come in potentially to assist you. And in my experience, it could either be another competitor that wants to consolidate. We can consolidate the market. You are in a weaker spot, but having 100% of nothing doesn't help you. So you'd rather have a piece of a bigger pie, if
very true.
that's
Yep.
And then help build value. And basically, you're just consolidating the market. So that has worked for me. At the same time, to me, the white knights land up being also out of industry. There are the players that want to forward integrate or backward integrate. And that's also a great play, and they come in with capital. And if it's a forward play, then there's there's immediate sales that take place. I think that all these actions take place at the same time, but underlining is that the product is still wanted in the market. If the product is dead, you've got to think of different ways of starting to how you're going to exit that. So, and if I may use an example, sorry, just not to elaborate, but I think it's very interesting, and this was up in Europe. I was with Global Finance, and we had invested in a paid TV operations. It was the Mediterranean operations for Naspers, a global South African global group, at the time over $100 billion market cap. Company went into there was a new competitor that started up in the country. You had content prices starting to just go up, soccer rights going up crazy, and then you started bleeding your subscribers. So the company going to loss. Once again, my action plan was setting up executive committees, a finance committee, an operations committee, being there every 2 weeks, getting into those meetings, analyzing. That's part of our job, analyzing the information, both the financial and the operational. And out of the operational, we identified even new opportunities to grow the channels, in the sense of we realized that this was in the Mediterranean. You have to adapt a number of your content to address the local market. So we found that strategy started working. Operationally, we discovered, and we actually discovered that the organization had been built out for 1 million subscribers, but so Naspers being a multinational, they'd initially built this thing out. We'll build it out and people will come. You're kind of realizing private equity, we like, we don't have that kind of luxury. So we had to convince management that under these circumstances, the infrastructure and everything to try and address 1 million subscribers, when you're sitting at 250, 300,000 subscribers, we've got to bring this down. And they collaborated. Other people collaborated. They understood for the success of the future success. So we did cut it down, which made the load a lot easier. And then, obviously being in private equity, I think we're pretty good in doing putting numbers together. And being a chartered accountant, I was following what the competitor was doing quite closely. You'll be surprised how much information lands up being in the media. So I was able to piece together contracts that they were doing for the content. All that was being announced in various newspapers globally. The satellites they had, down to the soccer rights, I knew what they were busy paying. And I was able to create a synopsis of what their financials were looking like, what their financials going to look like, and the projections, and what losses they're going to land up doing in the next 2 years. And we invited them for a meeting, and we had the management and the shareholders sitting over there, wealthy individuals, and I put it in front of them and saying, this is what your loss is going to be over the next 2 years. So the shareholders looked at this kind of horrified, because this was running close to $100 million over the next 2 years, and they said, okay, can we start talking? Management had to start speaking, so we landed up doing some form of merger. So we took the competition out of the market. As you can imagine, the soccer rights, the pricing in the soccer rights started coming down. The content costs started coming down. We had already kind of cut down on costs because of reshaping the organization. And at the same time, our ARPUs started going up because we were able to start pushing the price up. So,
of course,
So I think a few years later, then the platform, Naspers, and and Global Finance, and then at the time also Antenna TV was involved as shareholders, sold off the operations for $700 million. And for our investors, that meant 1.7 times X. So just
Very nicely done.
to some color, some real action that happens along the way.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of takes us very nicely into sort of the next part. So you spoke there about obviously going in, looking at that particular example and adjusting the content, you know, making sure the content was right for the local audience. Therefore, you know, how did you then, you know, approach things? So taking that from a leadership style, have you over different countries, different companies seen, is there consistent things that you do, or are there consistent adjustments that you need to do? Kind of a double-edged sword question. I take it whichever way you like, but I'm just interested. You know, it's great to see it from a product perspective within a business. I'm just intrigued to see it from a leadership perspective. You know, what have been some of those considerations and adjustments that you've learnt or had to make, depending on the audience and the locations and things like this? I think that's always super interesting to understand.
Yeah, Oliver, I think it's a pretty important question. So we start. I always start off with a plan, but guaranteed I know that the plan will be adapted like 1,000 times along the way. But you have to start with a plan, and clearly you have to adapt the plan according to the circumstances, understand your audience, understand your the market that you're selling. And I think that's something that I've had to learn from young, being involved in Africa. People talk about Africa thinking it's one country.
Very much not,
There's 54 countries in Africa. Sure, I've been involved in the bigger markets, but very different the way you're going to think in Nigeria, being on the ground, and the way things work in Nigeria to South Africa and to Egypt or Morocco. So each one has got there's no standard between them, but you've got to start with somewhere and then start adapting either the product to the local, even your negotiations. It also goes to being on the negotiation. If you're sitting in New York or in London, it's clinical. It's fast. It's clinical. In a place like in Africa, and I've seen it in the Middle East, it's the same. And in a place like Greece, I see a lot of similarities, a lot of family businesses. People, you've got to, it's not clinical. It's really, people want to judge you for a year. You don't just walk in and you do the term sheet and you've done a deal in a couple of weeks and the deal's done. In these markets, you're dealing with the Muslim entrepreneurs. You've got to respect, and when they're fasting, you've got to fast in a way with them, respect them. In Nigeria, you've got to understand their realities. In South Africa, it's different. So definitely you start off with the plan and the nature. The only thing I can guarantee you is change and adaptability. That's one thing that's guaranteed. So I hope I addressed your.
No, absolutely. And I think what would be interesting to understand is, across those different approaches, across those different locations, are there, and the answer to this may be no, but are there a sort of key core principles that guide you on your decision-making process? Is there a sort of a step guide you go through, or is there certain questions you need to ask to get to that sort of process?
There's always to start off, you've got to always keep your your corporate principles, corporate principles, and then the next thing is the investment strategy. You've sold a certain strategy to your limited partners, so you've got to act in so those are kind of immediate immediate for me. Then you have to look at the macro and the micro side of things, how the product or how this company's future is going to be implicated by the macro and the micro. That's definite. That's definite. And then understanding the future of the organization in the sense in the overall market. How can I say what are the expansion opportunities for that product? Is it on the front end? Are they innovative? How much of the market can you capture if you provide them the capital? So those are kind of decisions upfront that if you want to say that I like doing that upfront before we start spending a lot of money on a transaction. And clearly the outcome of the due diligence is pretty important. Understanding the commercial side, essentially I'm a manager of processes, so we do get we know a lot about a lot of things, but at the same time you have to bring someone that's completely concentrated on one specific sector to assist you in that. But the findings out of a due diligence shapes your decision as well. Can you live with the risks that have come out? Can you in the future control those risks? What measures can you put to control those risks? Or can't you live with any of the risks? And then you've got to walk away. So all that shapes and the adaptability of the transaction. And then obviously another thing is you've got to adapt. You start from one point in the negotiations, and after due diligence and everything that you've discovered, if you feel that you have to change the transaction, what kind of terms are you getting in the transaction? Is the pricing, are you paying a fair price for it? I never like overpaying for something, but it has to be a fair price, because if you also underpay, if someone's in a terrible state and you get this dirt cheap transaction and you enter the company, they'll remember that you did them in, and they'll make you pay for it for the rest of the time that you're part of that. So I strive for a fair deal, but to me what goes with it really and is the actual rights that I'm going to get there. Sometimes the rights are more important. That allows you to protect yourself going forward. And finally is the sponsor, the ethics of the sponsor. Do they match your ethics? Can you work with this person? It's a marriage. And the way things are today, I think if you're in a bad marriage, it's easier to get a divorce. But in a business deal, believe me, it's a lot more complicated. Be married to your partners over there it's a complicated. So let's get things upright and get your rights and all that, and then go ahead. But in all that, there's one thing is where you started with the deal and when you ended, the one thing's guaranteed, it is changed and you've had to adapt or walk away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in that last answer there, you obviously spoke about risk as part of the evaluation process. As sort of transformation, innovation, and importantly, sort of technology and AI is becoming more and more of our world, has that, what role is that playing in your ability to, how is that influencing your investment strategy, and especially how is that affecting the risk portfolio? Because what it looks like today could be drastically different even tomorrow, which may in the past have been, much further down the line. So I just wonder, have you seen that investment strategy changing more rapidly, or how it's evaluated?
Oliver, I think there's two sides to the question, and let's just address being in private equity or being in alternatives. There's the AI that's going to potentially impact the industry in the sense of managing on the manager's side, and then there's your portfolio. So clearly, and the two not really correlated, because looking into the portfolio, looking into the companies that you want to invest, clearly we are all looking at how processes can be improved. What AI is there? How's the AI? But in what way is it going to impact the industry? Where are the entrepreneurs? Are they doing some work on it? And if it's a great entrepreneur, great product, but he's kind of lagging behind it, can we address that? Is he going to be open, or is he fixed in his old ways? Or is he open to realize, look, I'm going to be out of business if I don't embrace it? But the other guys that bringing this value added, they're going to identify, we're going to work together, we're going to find and improve my processes, and we've got to work together and put those processes. So definitely, the AI side is going to impact the industry. At Harroth, we've had a kind of a brainstorm. Just kind of thinking, even on we own an airport, and we were about to also acquire an airline. And in the whole kind of brainstorming, we're also thinking, what are the future airports going to look like? How's it? What's it? Today we arrive to Heathrow or to Charles de Gaulle, and you're walking into the thing, and the plane is taking off on the runway. Are we going to, in the future, is it going to be this like rocket vertical that takes off? You just go in vertically, and then it gets the whole shape. Limited space for airports. There's going to be these vertical. So, and clearly we are always considering and thinking how that's going to happen. But the AI definitely, we know it. We're onto the fourth industrial revolution. So definitely it is impacting. So on the portfolio side, the companies, it's the one thing, but how's it going to actually impact the alternative assets? That's another question. So I don't know. You want me to kind of address?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
On that side, Oliver, there's one thing about private equity. It's a human. It's human. We're dealing with private markets, so I think there's certain things that AI, the industry is thinking. There's people that implementing different technology into the platforms, but everyone's still trying to find their feet. How it is. The one thing that I can say, you cannot rely on AI to do any negotiations for you. I don't know if that's going to happen in New York, but I can tell you in the emerging markets, just knowing, and be it in the Middle East, be it in the Balkans and Asia and in Africa and even South America, guys ain't going to be sitting next to a computer to negotiate the future of their family. It's a human business. So that on that side, I don't see it changing. But is it? There is the big data. There are those kind of factors that we have to embrace and use the big data that's out there. If I may just also step back, the fact that someone like BlackRock recently, I think it's about a month ago, they acquired Preqin, which is the biggest database for the private markets. They just paid $3.2 billion in cash to buy Preqin. And at the same, they paid something like 11 or 12 times, no more like a 15 times the sales multiple. And they're going to now integrate that into their Aladdin. So clearly, these big groups have got the capital to do it. But as smaller groups, there's collaboration. There's collaboration that you that is not expensive, that we all now implementing, that you can collaborate with your teams globally, real time, working on projects. There's the cloud, working and storing things on the cloud, but then you can work, people are sitting across the world. Everyone's got real-time access to that information, working on the same document at the same time and discussing. So it just makes the process more efficient. As I said, you have to have the likes of Thomson Reuters to be able to price, and even many times I have found the future buyers, being able to find future buyers for your transactions. I think a lot of the platforms are also thinking, how can we use the AI for due diligence and help us interpret the information? And certainly on portfolio management, management accounts come in. We'll kind of standardizing the kind of format that we would want companies to provide us the information that things can get analyzed and assist us and find trends. So when you go into meetings, there's all that has been done. So I think those are strategies that are being implemented on the alternatives. On the listed equities, before any of us ever heard of AI and algorithms, I mean, I just know at AIG Investments, we had a big portfolio, and we could clearly even see from BlackRock that everyone's now hearing AI. More than 15, 20 years ago, these listed equity groups, they started developing the first AIs. We never knew it. Machines started doing the trading and buying and the selling and on algorithms and AI. That was really the first. So we kind of hearing it, but these groups have been doing it for a long time. So on that side of the asset management, I think it's easier. Private equity alternatives, the guys everyone knows that. I think everyone's trying to find where it can help them in operations. But when it comes to the negotiations, private equity is still going to be there. We're all going to be negotiating face to face. I think that can't be replaced by AI or technology.
No, I completely agree, and I think it's similar to the executive search, talent acquisition space. There are certain parts of AI and tech that will benefit, but there is still some very key human interaction side that is still very important to play. So no, I absolutely agree on that front for sure. You've sort of answered the question I was going to ask next, and I just wonder if there's anything extra to ask. So I'm still going to sort of ask the question, but you might kind of say we've pretty much covered this. But are there any other sort of specific trends that you see are going to shape the sort of private equity asset management space? We've touched on some of those there in terms of what will stay and what will change a little bit, but are there any other things you feel I'll add on these extra few, or do you think we've pretty much covered that bit? I'm just intrigued if there are any we've left on the table, as it were.
I think kind of where I see maybe the markets, where the market's going over the medium term. As I said, there's a lot of kind of changes that happen all the time. So on the technology side, I think as we mentioned, certainly a lot of the groups are putting the AI. But one thing I can say is private equity is going to be and it's such a strategic to say that there's longevity. Someone like BlackRock, they feel that they're just scraping the sides on the private market, so they're putting a lot of money behind that. So private equity and alternatives are going to carry on well into the future. But kind of trends, if I may maybe elaborate here, the kind of trends that I see over the medium term that are going to continue. Clearly, we've had a decade, if not longer, of very low interest rates. I see the next decade, I don't think the interest rates are going to go anywhere as low as what it used to be in the past decade. So I think there's going to be a lot more expansion strategies here. I think the typical acquisitions and using leverage and cheap finance, I think that's going to be a bit more adjusted and more expansion capital coming out of that. Having a look, especially being involved on the GP-leds and the secondaries, and one thing that I did see globally, that there's a lot of, with all the world events, we've gone through COVID and there's been the wars. So there's a lot of private equity groups that are sitting with portfolios that are over 10 years or getting to 10 years. The exits are not quite where they should be at the moment. So yeah. I just see secondaries continue. They've had a tremendous growth, and I see that growing constantly because there's a real need to do continuation funds. So that side of the business I see constantly growing. ESG ESG has come a long way.
Yep.
So that's going to continue, and I think the green, how to say, green technology, renewables, there's going to be a constant investment going into that. And once again, there's always new greener and better technology coming out. So I think there's long legs on those kind of shaping the industry going forward. And then kind of finally, and with what I said, a lot of portfolios are long running now, in the sense, yes, there's going to be even there's been now secondaries that have taken place and GP legs, but they're now also reaching like 3 or 4 years into it, and the new LPs are going to be looking to exit. So I think there's going to be even on the private equity, the willingness to do M&As. So I think we're going to see an increase in M&As globally, and specifically around the private equity, we're going to see a lot of that. And I think that is an opportunity also for investment holding multinationals, but investment holding companies and family offices. I think the huge amount of capital coming out of, say, the Middle East, big family offices, I think they're going to be spoiled to be able to go out and get some good deals to add to their portfolio. So I see those kind of trends going forward.
Yeah. No, some of those are really interesting to hear, and some of them I absolutely completely agree with, especially ESG, green investments. I think also, as you said, some of those family conglomerates and so on, being quite cash rich and wanting to put that to use. I think, there's going to be some interesting times ahead for sure. Taking part of those trends into account and part of your own career, so that this can be a sort of a double-edged question, answer this in two separate things or together. Over your career, how have you been able to manage that work-life balance? And do you see, as technology plays a bigger part, do you see that potentially changing, i.e. maybe workforces are a little bit leaner and wanting more senior individuals, and therefore are they going to be stretched in different ways? So technology in a way should help us, but will businesses take advantage of that? So there's a bit of how have you kind of done a good job of being that family man, having the being there for your children and everything else? I think that's always interesting for people to hear. And then do you see any crystal ball, do you have any sort of belief or insight into where you can see this potentially going or changing in the future for other individuals? I'm just intrigued to get people's opinion on that.
Yeah, Oliver, I think I have to stress up front, number one, family is very important, and for me, and I think for a lot of people, and I think they a great motivator in your career, especially when all the bills come in. So, but they give you the source of Zoom. If a lot of excitement and you put that back into your career. but the nature of this industry is intense, but it goes through cycles. So typically always run smaller teams, specialized, highly skilled guys, but we always have to bring youngsters in. But I, on my side, how do I handle certain things? For me, I start my day by dropping off, breakfast with the kids early in the morning, and then dropping them off at school, having that time. But then my day ends very late, so I tend to end the days late, and then that frees my time up considerably over the weekend. Most of the times, that's if I'm not traveling. The travel side, but I think there's been acceptance. Your partner, your wife, your kids, they kind of accept it. But what I do know about the industry, there's times of intense, it gets very intense, and then there's slack time. And I've been in a privileged situation that when it's time to put in and it's intense, it goes and no one argues against it. But when the slack time comes in, I take advantage of it. And no one sits there. Yeah. There isn't any bosses or my boss, David Young, never used to call me from Hong Kong or when he was in New York. Yeah, what time did you arrive today or whatever? Because he knew when it was intense, you do the 48 hours. No one sees you 48 hours until you close the transaction. Then there's slack time, and I take advantage and be with the family. And I generally, it is, it's not a kind of a constant that every day that you're going to wake up and say, today I'm going to spend so much time with the family, so much time at work. I don't think it works in you won't get a deal done. You won't, I don't think that kind of works. On technology, sure, technology, I think has clearly, it has sped things up. So initially you think that technology is going to free your time. It just makes you work faster now. Everyone, the competitors.
There's just another task to do. Yeah.
So you still have to, now you just have to move forward. But when I was traveling in the early days, there weren't, you couldn't have this kind of conversation. Yes, there were cell phones, but you couldn't see your family, or your wife couldn't see you. You couldn't have this kind of thing, and this has actually become a great tool that the kids and family, when you're busy traveling and you call, they can actually see you. You can see them. It has helped. So on that sense, I think it has helped. Is the AI going to kind of free your time up? I think it will free your time up so that you can do other more important things. Because I think more menial things, you can maybe put some processes instead of you wasting your time. But it's important when it's intense that you put your time in, and then the slack time comes. Put more effort during the week, and over the weekend have more time to go to that soccer game with your child, go to the ballet with your daughter, be with your wife, go out for that's the way I've managed it along the way. And I've seen other colleagues do similar things.
Yeah, and I think it's probably similar to myself as well. I think the key thing is you need to have that ability to be able to, as I call it, switch on and switch off. Now is go time. We must switch on, but we must be able to switch off. And I think that's probably what you're saying as well, and what even I'm resonating with that is, I think the biggest skill I say to people is that ability to learn the switch off part, because when you can't switch off, that's your problem, because then you can't enjoy the downtime. I think that's the bit. So this might be one of those things that you were about to say, but what would you say then are some of the most important lessons that you've learned then throughout your career? These might be about doing the job itself. These might be about how you manage the personal life. It might be a combination of the two, but what may be a couple of those sort of key lessons that you've learned throughout the career that we could pass on to people?
Oliver, and I think the veterans and the people that are long term in this industry will know exactly what I'm saying, because I think we've all learned this along the way. This industry is a very humbling industry. One thing I can say is never get arrogant when things are going super well, because you don't know when the next crisis is around the corner. And someone that's gone through the AIG crises and financial crises and internet crises, I just remember everything was super well, and everyone was walking around that they were superheroes and arrogant. And it just took one day to change, and we were all running around. So definitely keep focus when things are going well. Just keep the focus, and it's so easy to lose the focus. Keep focus. That's one thing I've learned. The next thing is investing in relationships, especially in our industry. Investing in relationships, it's the people's business. At the same time, place value on good people. So it's with the good people that you're going to land up profiting, and everyone around is going to profit. What I have learned is once you stumble on a fraudster, the sooner you exit that relationship, the lower your losses. The more you kind of think things are going to turn around and you're going to sort things out with the fraudster, your losses and the implications just grow. Important. And I think there's going to be a lot of veterans that understand everyone's had to learn the hard way. Also very important, take care of yourself. Take care of your health, because that's important for you. It's important for your family, and also for your career. If you're not taking care, then you lose what you love across the board. So take some time, look after yourself. I think that's on a personal side, but it transcends across the thing. And there's one thing I can, in summary, and I think I've alluded before, there's one thing guaranteed in all this is change. So embrace change. Change is going to happen the whole time. It's happening faster. So that's the one thing. Make peace with it, and go with the flow and adapt.
Yeah, I think there's some pretty good lessons there. They're pretty good, and a lot of them resonate with me. The joke one I'd add on top is, on the looking after yourself one is also get some good life insurance. It's the one thing my wife made me get. It's the one thing my wife made to get. Yeah.
No, good. Yeah. Balance. Yeah. Everything is balanced.
Absolutely. We're not at the end yet, but one thing I like to do towards the end of these sessions is a quick fire round. So sort of a couple of sets, option A, option B, which one is more your focus, a little bit more of a quick fire insight into your personality. So I'm just going to fire a couple of sort of A or B option statements at you, and it'd be great to get your sort of thoughts on those. So it can be a simple one line answer or a bit of expansion if you want. It's up to yourself. So if we were to look at cash flow or profitability, what would you say?
Cash flow. Easy one.
Okay. Yeah. So long-term vision or short-term gains?
Long-term vision.
Okay. A hands-on leader or a delegator?
Delegator.
Okay. Are you the risk taker or the cautious approach individual?
Can I say the moderate risk taker?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely moderate.
Goes back to balance. Goes back to your balance.
Definitely moderate, and maybe we change. From younger. Certainly, where I am now in life, it's a moderate risk taker.
Mm-hmm. Well, even in as you joke, like our family's investment strategy, when you're younger, it's more stocks, less bonds, and as you get older, it's less stocks and more bonds. So you do have to balance it, and it does change over your life cycle. So I think I completely agree with that on all fronts, to be fair. So invest in technology or invest in people?
Invest in people.
Okay. And then sort of, yeah. So structured planning or adaptability?
I start with structured planning, but then you have to adapt. So quick fire, structured planning, that's where everything starts. And then you adapt.
Yeah. Okay. And are you a fan of growth or acquisition or organic growth?
Both.
Ah, okay. Very good. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a phase. Yeah, you find yourself having to do both in an organization. So both.
Yeah. Okay. And more emerging markets focused or more developed markets focused?
Personally, I've been significantly emerging markets focused. So I think emerging markets have been through a fairly tough time, but I think things are starting to change. I think the developed markets have had a very good run for quite some time. So
Yeah,
certainly, but it's a joint world, if I may just elaborate. Yeah, so clearly emerging market,
yeah.
but it's a joint world. The two can't exist without the other. As much as if you think of developed markets need things that are coming out of the emerging markets and vice versa. So,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of exciting things in the emerging markets.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I think, and again, it's also, as those markets innovate, they go from frontier to emerging and so on and so forth. So it needs that sort of growth trajectory. So equity financing or debt financing?
Equity.
Okay. And then our last sort of quick fire one. So more of a strong company culture or innovative strategies?
Innovative strategy. Yeah.
Okay.
I like change.
Perfect. Yeah, well, I mean that's it's part of the reason I was keen to have you on today. I think this is a leadership and a transformation sort of show, and we want to sort of share some of those lessons with people, and ultimately the heart of all that is adaptability and change. And so I think it's great to hear how the career's developed and how you've done some of the turnarounds, and obviously that all encompasses change. Then we've had change in the industry that we've discussed. So I think there's been that sort of overriding theme throughout, which has fitted in really well. So no, thank you for that. So I mean, in terms of moving towards the end of today, because I could talk to you forever, but I think there's a point where I do need to sort of start to wrap it up and things. If we were to say to our listeners, is there maybe sort of one sort of takeaway phrase that, it can be two if you want, but one or two takeaway phrases for people, or life lessons, or if you do this on a daily basis or weekly, monthly basis, this will be very beneficial, or something that if I was to look back to my younger self, I wish I knew what I know now, I wish I'd known then. Any sort of anecdotal bit like that? You can do 1, 2, 3 of them. I'm just keen, is there any sort of takeaway, sort of final thoughts that you'd like to share? Like I said, 1, 2, 3, anything like that? Is there any sort of final bits which we can sort of end on a really nice note?
Oliver, I think consistency. Be consistent. In our industry, there's one thing that's going to get you through this industry. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's great times and then really bad times, and being consistent during that. I think consistency. As I said, never be too arrogant. You never know when the next crisis is on you. Keep your focus. Certainly, as we mentioned, your health is important. So always take care of that. Look for good people, and in your process of making the money for your LPs, remember the ESG is important, and social gains. I think just sitting back and looking at the social gains that come out of doing things properly. Yeah. So to me, what's is leaving a footprint of what's really important is that once I leave an organization, I've left it in a better state than when I first entered it. So it must be in a better position. Looking back, I take a lot of pride looking at the social gains, be it environmental or creating more jobs, or so. Yeah, those kind of dividends for me are important. So yes, and pass on. Yeah, do your bit. Train the future leaders. There's a lot of people that started junior, and now they're running their own funds. Some are now multi-millionaires, billionaires at a very young age, and they still till today will call me, and I feel very proud with their achievements. So certainly, I think that's training in the future. And I think for me, be brave enough to open up new markets here. Indirectly, I feel with Egypt, when Egypt was being ignored, and international investors years ago when I invested in the port over there, kind of trailblazing, people were quite amazed, and they just opened up a new market. So yeah, I think open new markets, new destinations. It's a lot of excitement in doing that, and then seeing the social gains after that.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's some really, 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 really valid points, and I think I think the social gains point is really key, and I think it goes back to the balance. As we've said throughout this, there needs to be that balance of doing the right thing, leads to the social gains, leads to the ethics. Overall, overriding over the whole thing is that adaptability to change. And I think the kind of what's really nice there is within that end statement, we've really nicely wrapped up, I think, kind of pretty much what we've covered throughout today. And I think that's just what's been really nice about this, is it's fitted very well into the other conversations we've had with people. And I think you can consistently see again, consistency. You can see why people do well and what needs to be done. And I think I hope the listeners are kind of, getting some of these takeaways from this, because I think I'm enjoying doing these things, and I know people are enjoying liking and subscribing and things. So yeah, again, all I can say is, Tony, thank you so much for your time today. I think it's been a really good one. I've really enjoyed it. And look forward to keeping in touch as we always will. And again, thank you so much today. And yeah, thank you once again. Okay.
Oliver, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and I must admit, a lot of things that you just take for granted. This is thought-provoking as well, and I appreciate it. Thank you for giving me the time.
Thanks so much for your time, Tony. Cheers. Have a good day. Cheers.